How did the Panthers handle a rainy day 2 of training camp? I'll tell you right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Fridays throughout the offseason, I'm right here answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. It's been a while, but the weekly Friday mailbag is back tomorrow. So either at me or DM me, but of course, follow me on Twitter at Julian Council to get your questions in for tomorrow's weekly Friday mailbag here on Locked On Panthers. A special episode of Locked On Panthers here on this Thursday. I was at Carolina Panthers training camp earlier this morning, a rainy Thursday morning here in Uptown Charlotte. And this is one of the questions that a lot of us had with the situation with the practice fields, where honestly, I do love the setup that they have for training camp. You have one end of the field where it's friends and family and PSL owners, and the other end of the field, it's where you can buy, I believe, a $5 ticket on the Panthers website and be able to go out there and watch practice. And I've seen that a lot of these events have been sold out. Did not look like it was sold out today, as there's plenty of seats, at least on the end where I was at with the media and looking at the friends and family and PSL owners. The other side, couldn't really tell whether it was sold out or not. But I really do like the setup the Panthers have, trying to have that intimate training camp feeling and try to replicate, which is hard to replicate, that hill there at Wofford and playing at Gibbs Stadium for Back Together Saturday and all the events they've done in the past as this organization has constantly gone down there. And I really love that tradition. Unfortunately, no longer going on for at least the time being, and probably permanently, as they try to shift everything here. They're going to build a field house, and there was a whole rezoning request that happened earlier this year in 2024, and we were wondering, would they have an indoor facility by time they got to training camp? That, of course, is not the case. They tore down the bubble to add an extra field to be able to have the setup that they have for training camp right now. And days like today, where it rains, you wondered how the Panthers would be able to get their work done and manage the weather. And the weather really wasn't that bad, to be honest with you. When I got out there, probably around like 9:20, when I got to the field, about 10 minutes before the start of practice, it wasn't raining yet. You could see that it was obviously going to happen. Then once it started, it was fairly light, did pick up a little bit, but at no point was it pouring down rain. And that would be the situation where, okay, can we stay out here and keep doing this, or do we have to go in? And someone, I think it was Joe Person at The Athletic, after we met up with Dave Canales after practice indoors, he asked him, hey, there's these days like this, you don't have an indoor facility, how are you going to manage this? And David didn't really answer Joe's question, just said it was an opportunity. He came out before even taking questions and said that it was an opportunity to see his team handle the elements. And there was going to be games. And Bryce Young also said this when speaking to us. He said there are going to be days where it's going to rain, and you got to manage it. It's not always going to be sunny. It's not always going to be no wind, no clouds. You're going to have to deal with that every once in a while. So actually it was a beneficial thing for the team to have to deal with it. Just looking at the forecast, it may be the same way on Saturday at Bank of America Stadium when they have Back Together Saturday. And there's probably other times throughout the year. As we know, famously, they had to practice at the ballroom in the convention center back when Jerry Richardson was the owner here in Carolina, before they had the bubble that David Tepper put up there once he became the owner. So eventually they'll have the field house. They'll have a more permanent structure that will host training camp. But right now, this season, as I saw reporting from the Observer, doesn't appear they're going to have any sort of progress until after the season's over. So looking at the weather today, it was totally fine. It was not that big of a deal. I don't know if anyone out there was making a big deal. It's just there were a few raindrops and more than a few raindrops, and it settled at the end of the practice with really no rain at all. So not a big deal. A couple observations, and that's the nice thing about being out there. And my plan is to get out there as much as I can. I have other obligations with my full-time job over at NASCAR that does not allow me to be at training camp all the time. But the fact that it's here in Charlotte, where I live, A lot easier for me to go over there 10 minutes from my house opposed to going down like an hour 45 from my house all the way down to Wofford to go check it out. So I'm going to be there again on Saturday. Should be there on Monday as well. Thinking about going down the Clemson, TBD on all of that. And then got some other obligations where I won't be able to go. I'll be there probably on the 5th and I think joint practice with the Jets. So whenever I'm out there, I'll come out here, give y'all a podcast and just tell you what I was able to see that day. So looking just at the ones and the twos, that was what I was trying to really focus on. I was looking at my roster card, just trying to see who were some of the new numbers, some of the guys that are out there, just trying to chart all of that. Jonathan Mingo, this is a question that I had going into training camp. Would Xavier Legette immediately go into the wide receiver 3 spot as I try to talk? Would he immediately be wide receiver 3, or would he have to earn it? We go back to last season, Frank Reich, Thomas Brown, and their whole operation, which we know did not go well. They threw Jonathan Mingo out there as wide receiver 3 immediately, that he never had to compete for that job. And you look around, Laviska Shenault wasn't going to be that guy. Terrace Marshall Jr., you would have thought would have started off in that position, but instead never really got the opportunity. There weren't a ton of options available to them, but still you'd like for a rookie to at least earn it. And Mingo didn't have to earn it last year. This year, Xavier Legette's going to have to earn it. And Dave Canales said that he would love for all the guys on this roster to earn their place, especially for a rookie. He said, show us you can put in the work ethic, show us that you can get down the routes and the timing, show us is what he said. So he wants Xavier Legette to show them. And Xavier's pretty tough on himself on Wednesday, day 2 of training camp, feeling like we didn't get a reception. I couldn't get open. I'm trying to remember, did he get a catch today? He did have, at least there's a video out there. That was the one oohs and ahs that I had heard from the crowd at camp this morning where he had a diving catch. You would have seen it on the Panther socials. They put it out there. As far as in team drills, can't recall whether he did or not. Again, like it's day 2. I was more focused on who was out there, who wasn't out there, some of the formations where they had some guys lined up more than I was, okay, did this guy have a big play or not? The defense did have a couple of big plays. We'll talk about that here momentarily. So Xavier is going to have to earn a spot. And knowing that Mingo is ahead of him, he's going to get that spot eventually in due time. So Legette, Terrace Marshall Jr., Amir Smith-Marset, those are the 3 receivers that were primarily with the 2s, where Mingo was at wide receiver 3, Thielen, and of course, Deontay Johnson, who we also spoke to afterwards. And I asked Deontay if he was out there in California with Bryce Young with the throwing sessions that Xavier brought up to the media on Wednesday. And he told me that he was not out there. So they're still working on their chemistry. And I meant to follow up with Bryce and ask him if there was another time the last 6 weeks when they've been off, if those two got together. Either way, the best way to get together and to really figure out your timing is out on the field. And that's the point of training camp right now for all of them and the Panthers. A couple other things. Tommy Trimble, he came out late with all the guys who were on a PUP, physically unable to perform list, and was not out there for practice. He was experiencing tightness, as Dave Canales told us afterwards. Ian Thomas was getting the snaps at tight end 1. I did see Jatavion Sanders, JT Sanders out there. And one time, they're in 11 personnel. So that's 1 running back, 1 tight end. You got 3 receivers, and they had Sanders split out wide. It was basically twin sets for the Panthers. It was twin sets for the Panthers. You had one side where you had 2 receivers. The other side, you had 1 receiver. And then you had all the way out wide to close to the sideline on the boundary. You had JT Sanders. And I was wondering, are we going to see a lot of that? I was talking to somebody wondering if that's something they had seen yesterday. And are we going to see similar to what Atlanta's been doing with Kyle Pitts, where rarely was he ever in the 3-point stance the last couple of seasons, especially last year for the Falcons? Is that going to be the case with JT Sanders, who there's some questions about his ability to block right now, but if he can get out wide and he can catch the football and be a threat in the passing game, that is beneficial to a team that has been in desperate need of a pass-catching tight end in this offense since Greg Olsen left here in Carolina. Looking over at defense, a couple observations. They rotated out a lot of the starters on a defensive line next to Derek Brown. Typically had 2 down linemen there at the defensive line. Then you would have on one side Caleb Chase on. He's getting the 1 reps at the other outside linebacker spot opposite Devion Clowney, as you have DJ Wonnum out. DJ Johnson was back today after having an illness, but he was not in there with the ones. He was out there with the twos instead. You had the 2 down linemen. So you had Brown, one spot, and then it was a rotation of Shai Tuttle, Ashawn Robinson, TJ Smith, who I did not have on my bingo card or even in my notes as somebody to expect to potentially challenge for a number 1 spot. Having conversations with someone on the side, they're saying maybe don't get too caught up in that right now. They're just rotating guys in and out there early on in camp. So there's a little observation. Jordan Fuller was not out there at safety. I took note because Nick Scott, who was in Cincinnati last year, before that was in Los Angeles. He's here because of Jero Rivero, understands the defense, has that relationship. He was out there instead with the ones with Xavier Woods. Alex Cook and Sam Franklin Jr. were with the 2s. I was wondering what was going on with Jordan Fuller. We asked Dave Canales afterwards, and he said he had a family matter, and that's why he was not out on the field. It feels like still when he's healthy, and from the conversation I've had, when he's healthy, he's going to be the number 2 guy. He's going to be a starter with Xavier Woods. But Nick Scott was out there with the ones, which is notable, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on here on the show when looking at things. In fact, let's go ahead and take a quick pause here and talk about our friends over at Gametime. I'm going to do one quick ad read, and we can talk about the rest of the observations I saw on Thursday at Panthers camp. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With Carol last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Get a panoramic view from the seat in your app before you buy. Take guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, so back to the observations from day 2 of Carolina Panthers training camp. Was out there in Uptown Charlotte, facing the rain, was not bad at all. Like it picked up a little bit, as I told you earlier, but then wasn't that big of a deal later on. Looking at a couple of other observations, backup offensive line. This is something I was told before we got to see them. Cade Mays, not Brady Christensen, appears to be the backup center. Looking at the backup offensive line right now with Josh Nijman not available and on PUP, Ricky Lee at left tackle, Chandler Zavala at left guard, Cade Mays at center, Brady Christensen at right guard, and Badera Traore over at right tackle. And I did see they were cross-training, had Christensen over at left at a point in time, Zavala at right guard at another point in time, but that's how it's looking right now, backup offensive line. Lee at left tackle, Zavala at left guard, Cade Mays, not Brady Christensen at center, Christensen at right guard, and then Badera Traore right now at right tackle. And whenever Josh Nijman is back, I assume he'll be right there at that right tackle spot for Carolina when looking at the backup offensive line. And speaking of the offensive line, at least one thing here with the roster notes I want to get into. Likely the Panthers are going to keep 9. We talked about this on Monday when I was projecting the 53. They're going to keep Icky at left. They're going to have Damian Lee at left guard. At center, it's going to be Austin Corbett. Right guard is going to be Robert Hunt. Right tackle is going to be Taylor Moton. Then after that, Josh Nijman will be their backup tackle, but really their 6th guy is going to be Brady Christensen. So there's 7 right there. Then they're going to have Cade Mays, who's the backup center. That's 8, and likely only going to keep 1 more, which is going to come down to Ricky Lee and Chandler Zavala. From the conversations I had today, it sounds like the organization really likes Ricky Lee as a developmental player and someone that can help him out down the road. So Ricky Lee would be the 9th guy over Chandler Zavala, which is disappointing considering Zavala was just drafted last year. And I don't think that Jamie Robinson, who also was a day 3 pick for the Panthers last year, will be on the roster. That's 2 day 3 guys who are unlikely to be on the team this year as far as on the initial 53. And then you look at the other 2, DJ Johnson as a backup right now. They signed someone else to come in an outside linebacker. How big of a role does he play in Jero Rivero? First and foremost is focus on guys at the outside linebacker spot who can stop the run. which can speak to Jadeveon Clowney being here, Brian Burns no longer being here. Of course, the contract figures were a big part of that, but defensive coordinator philosophy-wise, he's looking for guys who can stop the run first and foremost before guys can go out there and get after the passer. Not the sexiest thing, certainly not something that fans are looking at and wanting, because they want to see sacks. They want to see pressure on a quarterback. That's not necessarily something that Jaroville doesn't want to see. Just a primary focus is we got to set the edge. That's your job, first and foremost, as an edge rusher. And really, that is kind of the job for someone in that spot, that they got to be able to set the edge. And he feels like they can do that. So I'll be interested to see just what position DJ Johnson is going to be in as far as on the depth chart once they probably do bring in someone else here at that outside linebacker spot while they wait for DJ Wonnum get healthy and just add some depth in general. As Amari Barno, he was out there, changed his number to 38. By the way, he was out there, but not practicing as he's still recovering from the ACL tear from last year and on the PUP list. But yeah, looks like 9 guys. Ricky Lee would be the favorite to make it as that 9th guy for Carolina. Kickoff return. Was wondering what it was going to look like. Went over the rules with you a couple of weeks ago in a special teams breakdown. First time I had watched a video of it. First time I had really read all the rules and got to see it. There's someone behind me. I forget who it was. They're like, what are they working on? And someone said kickoff. And it was strange to see in person, especially field level. Maybe if I was higher up in the stands looking at it, it wouldn't have been as jarring, but it was. It was jarring to see just how close everybody was and then see how the Panthers lined up. So the way that they're going about it, you can only have 2 men back there behind the 20. And the Panthers have it where they have one designated returner, and then they have another guy who's operating as an up back as a blocker. So the returners that I saw out there today were Raheem Blackshear, Amir Smith-Marset, and David Moore. Those are the 3 guys returning. You ask, what about Xavier Legette? Well, Legette was out there blocking. Same with Deshaun Jameson, Mike Boone, and Jaden Sheardon. So Blackshear, Smith-Marset, Moore were the returners. Jameson, Legette, Boone, Sheardon. Those are the 4 guys who were back there, but blocking for the Panthers. We'll see how that continues to grow. And again, this goes back to, we want to see him earn it. Xavier Legette, if he's going to be wide receiver 3 to start the season, he's got to earn it. If he wants to be the primary kick returner, he's got to earn it. Raheem was the first one out there, by the way. Understand that. It was him and it was Deshaun Jameson. Those are the first 2 out there when it came to kick return. So we'll see how that develops. Right now, Raheem Blackshear looks like the top guy. Amir Smith-Marset and David Moore also as returners. Some other notes. Shaw Smith-Wade and Jalen Coker, both of them were on the PUP list to start off training camp. That was some news that came out after I put out that show for y'all for Monday. I had gone out of town and all that. But Shaw was out there today. So was Jalen Coker. They both looked fine. Didn't seem like either of their injuries were that big of a deal, just to give you an update there. As far as tryouts go, Marquise Haynes, he was dapping up some staff members there in Carolina as he was out there today, as he's getting a tryout. He had it. I'm sure it's already happened, but he had a tryout today. We'll see how that goes. Dave Canales didn't want to speak about the tryouts, as it seems they want to keep it under wraps who necessarily trying out. So it's an advantage for them, and other teams will try to scoop up that player potentially. Haynes had an issue last year of his back, was never healthy, and that just derailed the season. The last game he played, he got carted off in Jacksonville, his hometown, which was awful to see, but it was only concussion, which obviously I know is serious, but he was fine. Nothing that anybody gets carted off, you get concerned. It wasn't that bad. Of course, it is your brain, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been. So Marquise Haynes was out there. We'll see. And I saw there was reporting that came out on Wednesday, and I had told y'all that they're looking to bring in Yannick Ngakoue, who apparently had flight issues. Surprise, surprise. Everyone's been having flight issues, and we know Charlotte Douglas Airport and American never rely on it. But he had flight issues, so he was not able to get here just yet. Adam Schefter had reported he was going to visit on Wednesday through Thursday. Last time I checked, he's not here in Charlotte currently. So there's that. And look, there's a group of guys that were here for tryouts. One of them I recognized, but I couldn't put the name to a face to a name. But the only guys that I could tell who they were Marquise Haynes and then Jerry Jacobs, who was talking to Dre Bly, dapped up Dre Bly. Dre Bly, who most recently was the cornerback coach up in Detroit. He's now a defensive analyst for the Charlotte program for Biff Poggi here in Charlotte. He was out there at training camp, and I thought I saw him. He was like right there standing by me. I was like, is that Dre Bly? What is he doing here? And Dre Bly was hanging out, and he was there to see Jerry Jacobs, who started a couple games, I think more than a couple, like a dozen games for the Lions last year, and would make a lot of sense for the Panthers to bring him in. The Panthers need to bring in, I know plenty of you are probably waiting on Stephon Gilmore, but they bring in, and Dane Jackson actually looked pretty good today, by the way. If they bring in another corner, go ahead, bring in Jerry Jacobs if he's here. That makes sense, and you can get a good deal signed. They only have so much cap space anyways, which is important to note. Bring him in, bring in Haynes, or bring in Ngakoue if you can afford it. I don't know if they can afford Ngakoue, just based off how it seems like he's operated in the past. If they're bringing Haynes, who's a veteran, already knows the scheme, and wasn't healthy last year. And we know when he's healthy, he's a 5-6 sack guy. Like that's replacing what you're losing in Yetur Gross-Matos. And really, you're probably going to get more in terms of pass rushing ability with Marquise Haynes. So bring in Haynes, bring in Jacobs, and I feel fine about where that defensive roster is as far as what you could reasonably expect at this point in time in training camp. Stephon Sullivan, he was carted off the field. Looked like he went right behind me. He was massaging his right calf. So we'll see what the deal is there. He got a lot of reps today. I didn't really see Jordan Matthews out there getting any reps for the first time, but we saw first team. We saw a lot of Stephon Sullivan, plenty of Ian Thomas. I'm sure that will elicit an eye roll from many of you out there listening and watching, and got to see JT Sanders. A couple other roster notes. As I mentioned earlier, Nick Scott was out with the ones. Conversation I was having on the sideline. It sounds like he's going to be their number 3 corner, or safety, rather. I thought maybe with the best veteran, guaranteed contract, maybe they'd cut him and then bring him back. No, he's their 3rd safety. So he's going to be on the roster. Alex Cook, he should be good. Sam Franklin, obviously, he's going to be good. 5 safeties, what it looks like here in Carolina. I believe I projected them to have only 4 safeties. Let's go back to my notes here from the other day. Yeah, I only had them having 4. I took Alex Cook over Scott and Robinson. So 5 safeties is what we're looking at here in Carolina. 9 offensive linemen. And I had Zavala over Lee. It's going to be Lee over Zavala if it even comes down to that. Nash Jensen, not going to make it. Somebody who doesn't have any flexibility, can only play one position. And that was a James Campen pick. And Campy's obviously not here anymore. Kicker competition. That is real, by the way. I feel like it shouldn't be real, but here's the situation. The Panthers feel like if Harrison Mevis, UDFA and Mizzou has a bigger leg, they feel like Mevis can save them some money. If they cut Pinheiro, they get like $1.2 million back in salary cap room. That can help them with some of the moves that they're going to make right now, or even when the season begins. And it's not like this is a team that is competing to go to the playoffs. If they were trying to be, I know they're trying to be, but they really had the expectation. They try to not give out expectations, but they really had the expectation that this was going to be a playoff team. You're not going to risk cutting a player like Pinheiro and then putting a rookie in there instead. And I have compared this to the Graham Gano, Harrison Butker situation, a little bit different because both of those were really good options. And unfortunately, neither one of them were here. But that was a team that was experienced and felt like they had a playoff team. They weren't going to bank their season on someone else. It worked out for the Chiefs, as we know. The main problem was how Matt Rule handled the whole situation with Gano. When Gano was healthy, he's one of the best kickers in the league. And Pinheiro was a good kicker. But at no point have you ever seen a kicker hold out. And when you hold out like he did, now it's voluntary. But when you're not out there at OTAs, it's not called a holdout. But if you're not out there for OTAs and you're trying to send a message about the contract you want, teams don't like that, especially for a kicker, knowing that you're a specialist and they got to get things done with you being able to kick. That wasn't something that apparently sat right with Carolina. At least that's assumed it hasn't sat right. Not saying officially, but it seemed that didn't really sit right with them. An interesting move. And you can question, should it be? Quarterbacks do it all the time. Receivers do it all the time. All that. But yeah, like how many times have you seen a kicker not show up to that? It's voluntary, but still, that's something that has made them want to really look into Mevis, who they got to see a ton of. And when you get to see a ton of him, you see what he looks like kicking compared to Pinheiro, you're going to wonder, could we be better off with the cheaper option opposed to a guy who we're going to have to pay a decent amount of money for that position if we do keep him around. So the kicker competition, that is real. Overall, the defense won today. I have my concerns about the defense. The secondary looked pretty good. And with the weather, there was a couple fumbles. That was something that Dave Canales didn't like, but he did look on the other side of the coin and say it was a point of emphasis for Jerry Rivera this offseason about punching the ball out, that they need to get turnovers, and they got turnovers. Not great for the Panthers offense, but good for the Panthers defense that they got turnovers. That was something I wanted to point out before we signed off here today. The defense looked like they played better, but when it's raining and the weather is like it was today, the defense probably should be the team that performs better than the offense. Still, a good sign. The Panthers' new look defense heading into the first weekend of training camp. Maybe not the best sign for the offense, but an opportunity for them to clean some things up and to also have to face the elements on this Thursday in day 2 of training camp. So that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at Julian Council, where I'll be back with you on Friday to answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions, either at me or DM me to get those questions into me right now. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And again, I'll talk to you on Friday.